Welcome back. We're the dads of football after a 2-week hiatus. Here we are, and we are talking top landing spots for QBs. Before we dive into it, for those of you watching, make sure to like, subscribe, and check out the rest of our content as we are new here. I mean, we've really been doing this for about a month now, starting to get
Yep.
into the stride of it. And we had our spring break, and here we are. QBs. I guess we're going to go straight down the list. As far as QB needing teams, number one, no surprise, you got the Chicago Bears first pick. Is there any debate? Is there anyone to take other than Caleb Williams at this point?
I can't imagine I can't imagine a scenario where they don't pick Caleb Williams. It would not make sense to trade that pick at this point and take a flyer on a Drake May who in his pro day looked athletic, looked strong armed, but you and I have talked about this before. I still put to question a little bit of his accuracy. Um, Jaden Daniels would be the only guy that maybe you'd be willing to take a flyer on, praying that he ends up being like Lamar Jackson. But Caleb Williams, I think all but solidified that at his pro day, showing one, the arm strength, two, the accuracy on throws to the outside and through the middle. And to be really honest with you, and Jeremy, you and I talked about this a couple times. It was great to see him interacting with teammates, the NFL brass. Whether he was trained and polished for that day, I don't know. But I thought he just looked like somebody that was likable. His teammates seemed to relish in any success he had that day.
The pro days finished up when we were on break, and we wanted to talk about it. We just we're off doing our own thing. And the thing that I noticed, first of all of these guys look good on their pro days. I mean, let's be honest. You're not gonna if you're a first round type of caliber quarterback, you're going to look good at your pro day against air. I looked for the
Yeah.
finer, little, tiniest things to criticize. And I would say Caleb Williams had the fewest of those elements to criticize. His feet
Yes.
were quick. His feet looked good. As far as his mechanics, I thought his mechanics looked the best. His actions were the quickest. Now, he's not the
Yeah.
fastest quarterback, but his
No.
feet, like just getting out from under center, I was the most impressed with his movements. They didn't look mechanical. They looked like they were natural, which is why I just think he's the number one guy. There's no doubt about it in my mind. I think you just have to go conventional wisdom. That's who you're
Yeah.
taking. And if the Bears took Jaden Daniels at one over him, which I think there's like a 0% chance would happen, the city of
No way.
Chicago would go nuts.
Yeah. I think you'd have an implosion here in the city of big shoulders. There was maybe two throws all day from Caleb Williams where I said that's not great. The rest were fantastic. He had the post corner that he threw to Rice that I didn't think was fantastic, and then he had about a 15-yard out that was just a little behind. But the rest of the time, especially on any balls across the middle, he just looked smooth and clean and just rhythmic. And I think that's one of the things that I recall from, and I hate the comparison, but because I don't think it's always fair. But the one thing I remember about Mahomes, both one, when we saw him from his pro day, but two, I had told you the story before about bringing my son's football team up to Minneapolis for the Super Bowl and seeing Mahomes playing catch with Juju Smith-Schuster, and they're just clean out of his head. He's just a rhythmic thrower. It's polished is I think probably an oversimplification. To your point, moving out from under center, Williams looks great. Shotgun looks great. His hips are always in the right spot, and even more than that, I just felt like it looked effortless. You know, so
If I think the most debate that's possible, and the one that could be a bit of a wild card, although I think it's settling down, is at number two. What the
yep,
Washington Commanders end up doing with that pick. Going into this process, it looked like Drake May was the consensus number two. Now, the narratives, if you go from the Rumorville and all the experts on Twitter, everyone's now saying Jaden Daniels is number two to the
yeah.
Commanders. Now, I don't think that is 100%, but it's looking more 70-30 than 50-50 at this point. And I gotta say, if I'm gambling here, if I'm the Commanders, I think I'd rather go with Jaden Daniels.
I can't imagine a situation where you wouldn't take
Mhm.
Jaden Daniels at this point. I think there's enough questions about Drake May. I think you like the polish that you've gotten Jaden Daniels, or at the very, very least, the product he was last year at LSU when he threw for 3,800 yards, rushed for 1,200 yards. I mean, he's just was so dynamic and so enjoyable to watch, even at his pro day, in a different way. His throwing looks effortless. And I just feel like his ability to make plays outside the pocket for a team like Washington right now in sorely need of that. Especially considering they're still addressing their own tackle woes.
Mhm.
So you're going to need, and for that matter, they need a guard or two. So I, I don't know why you wouldn't take a kid like that, especially because I think there's a lot of questions about Drake May.
My questions about Drake May isn't so much the production. I think if you
Right.
look at his 2 years there, the numbers looked fantastic. Well,
Yep.
they looked really good. The biggest concern was people talked about how, okay, he dropped off. Even dropping off, his drop off was just about the same as Caleb Williams's drop off. They
Right.
threw for just about the same amount of passes. I think it was the
Yeah.
uptick in interceptions and the lowering of completion percentage, which is the concern there. And then again, if we're just going down to the finite points of the pro day, I wasn't crazy about his footwork when he's getting out from under center. When you see him, he does some weird things. Like he jumps up in the air when he's rolling back, and it's almost like he's floating backward and then trying to shoot the
Yeah.
ball out at the same time. And it's like, I don't get why you would leave your feet and kind of leap up and do that. Now, I knew they had like a coach that was trying to pretend like it's someone in his face, but even then, I'm not wanting you to
Right.
jump up in the air with your momentum going backwards and launch it. He's the only quarterback that I saw do that during his pro day.
To me, one of the reasons why I think that happened is I think that, like all these pro days, it was scripted, right? And he's trying to show off the dynamics of his ability to scramble. I mean, he rushed for 449 yards last year, was showed the ability outside the pocket. So maybe they built that into his pro day rather than obviously just rolling him out the whole time. There was something about his fluidity once he was set that to me looked clunky. And to your point about his feet, there were multiple times where his front foot was still pointing sideline as he's driving the ball downfield. There
Mhm.
were times where he was on his heel after he gets set, roll to his heel, and then let his arm do the work for you. In the pros, your feet are going to do the work because so many arms are similar. And to your point, it just looked, relatively speaking, clunky.
It reminded me a little bit of Will Levis last year when we were
Yeah,
watching him do this stuff. It's like, yes, we know you have a strong arm. We can see the muscle tone there, but when you're
yeah,
trying to muscle it through your arm and your hips look stiff, that's and now not to say that he looked nearly as stiff as Will Levis.
right.
He's not. And he's a much
No,
better athlete than Will Levis, to be fair. I mean, he's a quick guy, he's fast. It's just those little finite things that when I thought Jaden Daniels doing his progression, his feet just look cleaner. The
yeah,
ball comes, he's not like a thick guy, but the ball still flies off of his fingertips. There's some concerns there too. The deep ball wasn't terribly accurate during his pro day. There were a couple misses he
no,
had. But at the same time, Drake May, you go to the intermediate routes, and on those out routes to the sideline, he had one miss that was really bad that everybody talked about. And you're just
right.
like, whoa, your adrenaline must have kicked in there for a second. But you're gonna have those things. But again, they count when you're looking at the smallest possible tell that maybe there's something there.
Particularly in a controlled environment like a pro day,
Yes.
where you would think that's scripted, they've already run through that. And to your point specifically about the throw on that out route, it it looked like he was muscling through it. It did. And I think the your point about his hips is absolutely right. It looks, I don't want to use the word fluid here, but it looks less athletic when he's throwing his out routes.
Hmm.
It
Yeah.
appears he has a hard time clearing through that front side on his throws. And I wonder if on those out routes on a scripted day, maybe that's why I think they went from that out route back to a middle breaking route. I believe his next completion was right on the hash. Um, but yeah, I agree 100%.
So we're on the same page here. So if we're going
Yep.
Williams, Daniels, New England Patriots need a quarterback. We all assume that they're going to pick a quarterback at 3. Who's the quarterback? I don't hear a ton of people saying Drake May to the Patriots. I don't hear that.
No,
So what
no,
happens?
I think so many of the mock drafts and particularly there were a couple that came out in the last 6, 7 hours. CBS NFL came out and right now they have identified that May is going to Washington, Daniels is going to New England. Uh, you and I agree that you would take Daniels if you're Washington. You start looking at New England and you go, well, is this an opportunity for them to maybe move out of this situation and go for a Wolverine later on? See if they can ride the Brady magic, the Michigan magic that Brady brought. If New England stays there, it almost feels like they have to take Drake May. And knowing that that offense is going to need some overhauling in the next couple years, and that team is going to be starting from scratch, you take a Drake May and you trust your ability to get him to perform at a higher level. And I think that's entirely possible. I think that's entirely possible. That's what happens with the Patriots, but it doesn't feel like a great fit.
There's been a ton of chatter about what you just said, JJ McCarthy to the Patriots. And I can't imagine that they would take him at 3. I mean, it just sounds way like they've already boosted him up against quarterbacks that I don't think he's better than. The fact that you could then possibly boost him up over Drake May at that spot, I just don't see
Right.
the logic in that. If it was between the two, either taking Drake May or going down and taking McCarthy, I might actually lean moving down and taking McCarthy. That's what I think they would do, not necessarily what
Right.
I think they should do, because you know me, I am not crazy about JJ McCarthy still.
No.
Again, he's just too raw and untested for me to take him before a Drake May. To take him before a Bo Nix, I still don't like, but he will be taken before Bo Nix.
He
Um,
will
and I don't
at
know
this point.
at this point. So, I mean, if we're talking about them moving back, who would be moving up into that spot? I mean, would it be a surprise team like the Vikings, the Broncos, um, the Raiders? You know, I guess those would be kind of my teams as contenders to move up in that spot. Out of all of them, I just don't know. Or do the Giants slip up there? You know,
Yeah, I mean, if the Giants do trade up there, right? And specifically with New England, are they really going to pick Drake May? Aren't they just picking a guy not too unlike who they just signed to a significant contract? I
yes,
mean,
you and I would see that.
that to me would be shocking. I mean, is it out of the realm of possibility that the Patriots do what they have done for the last 2 decades and trade out and try to recoup 2 or 3 picks from somebody, particularly to this draft, one next draft, with someone like the Raiders? Would it really be that shocking for the Raiders to do something like that? I don't think so. I can't imagine that they are banking on their current quarterback situation as it stands.
hmm let's man, that I mean that is a slippery one. If Daniels goes, what does New England do? I think just for the sake of argument, just looking at this, let's just say they take Drake May there at 3. Let's say there's no trades. We
Sure.
don't go that deep into it, which you would then travel down the list. I think you and I will both skip the Giants on taking
Yes.
anybody as a quarterback there. How ironic would it be if they listen and they don't take a quarterback there, particularly a guy that's so like the guy that they have now in Daniel Jones, and then next
Right.
year they suck again and they get like a top 10 pick again, and they go with a Riley Leonard from Notre Dame, who's just like every single guy there, and a
Yes.
former Duke Blue Demon who's now a Notre Dame transfer. But I wouldn't be. How crazy would that be? I just it would be hysterical if they did that.
I can't imagine the Giants don't pick a receiver. If considering the amount of money they've given Daniel Jones, how do you not go get him bare minimum some weapons or
Give him a
trade that
chance.
and try to give him some weapons and then get him an offensive line that can protect him. And I'm not saying Daniel Jones is the answer, but you paid him like he is the answer. So really, we gonna skip right past that? Are we not even gonna
Hmm.
consider the fact that you paid him that money? So um I think the draft this year has some kind of fun interplay between that 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pick to see what happens. And if the Broncos do jump up, right, and they do get rid of their number 12 pick, which I think a lot of people think they're going to take Brock Bowers there, what direction are they really going to go? I mean, what if they jump up to that Patriots pick? Are they going to take Drake May? And Sean Payton's going to trust his ability to develop Drake May in the relatively short window that it appears Sean Payton, could end up having with considering they've already started moving some of their other pieces. So if
It's
those picks are
right in that zone. I think those picks are going to be
right,
interesting. What happens between 2 and 3? I mean, that's pretty much going to decide and reverberate the entire way through with the rest of the quarterbacks.
right,
So let's say, all right, Drake May's off the board. The next team that you really look at that needs a quarterback would be the Vikings at 11.
yep.
What would they do? There's just something about the Vikings that tell me they are not going to take JJ McCarthy there. I don't know why.
Oh, you know what? I of the guys that I think they can take, um, Kevin O'Connell seems to love leaders. He seems to love guys that have had a lot of starts under their belt who are going to be able to distribute the ball and command the locker room. I think I said this to you before. The idea of them drafting someone there like a Michael Penix Jr., which I think is probably a little bit early because you could argue that about Bo Nix as well.
Mhm.
There's just something about Michael Penix Jr. I understand you and I have talked ad nauseum about his health risks, but man, is he gifted physically. I mean, if he can stay healthy, what can they get out of him? I mean, how special might that be?
You
So,
see,
especially throwing to Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson. I mean, there are so many things that are exciting about that. But I I could also see the Vikings trading up and taking McCarthy, though. That's the thing that fascinates me is 11, 12, 13 could end up jumping up into those 3, 4, 5 spots, in desperation moves. So
see, I could see them saying, "All right, McCarthy, we're not going to play with you right now." I could all the things that you said about Penix, I would apply to Bo Nix. And
for
again,
sure.
guys in similar positions that have that experience and have that leadership under their belt, like you just said. The only difference is to me, if you're looking for the most accurate passer in this draft, it's Bo Nix. Everything on his statistics show me that when you're throwing 78% on a team that throws a lot, like his accuracy to
Right.
me is with the receivers spreading out the field, you could dink it and doink it and then go over the top because maybe he doesn't have an arm as strong as some of the guys, but he's still got a
Right.
pretty strong arm. Like I think all of these guys are pretty strong armed quarterbacks. So we're talking about A plus strength to B plus strength. I don't
Right.
think there's a huge drop off. I just think he looks good in purple. I
Yeah.
could see it.
And I think the nice thing about Bo Nix is they may not have to get him in the first round. I mean, as of right now, most mocks have him dropping, Bo Nix not being in that first round. So now you don't have to trade. Now considering Minnesota has obviously needs a quarterback, they need an edge rusher, they need a cornerback, they need a defensive lineman, they need a receiver, they need running back help. Although I guess you could argue they don't anymore. But the idea of them waiting and taking a Bo Nix, considering you've already got 3 significant weapons to distribute the ball to downfield, I would love that. I would love that.
Yeah.
I have a soft spot in my heart for Penix and Nix, less because of their health and just more because they appear to be in most drafts the kind of guys you want leading your franchise. But because we have Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Drake May,
Mhm.
they're taking all the pub, and rightly so. Rightly so. However, I'm with you. I would love to see Nix, or for me, Penix, even more so, end up on Minnesota. And I'm a Bears fan. I don't want to see Minnesota get better. Um,
Yeah.
but if you're talking about what's best for the players, just like you and I thought Fields was probably better off landing in Pittsburgh, and he did.
Mhm.
So
If we're looking at the Denver Broncos at 12, they need a quarterback too. That would be another
yep,
quarterback needy team. I don't, there's something about Denver that speaks JJ McCarthy to me that just to me
screams it.
seems that's a landing spot for him. To me, I don't know what it is there. I don't know if it's the douchiness of Sean Payton over there, or I could just see him having an attitude in the same everything I don't like about Jim Harbaugh reminds me a bit of Sean Payton. Like they're the same mannerisms that I just don't like about those two
Yes,
dudes. Yet they win. They win.
right,
I mean, Sean Payton didn't win last year, but they win. Um,
right.
but I could see him taking a very Jim Harbaugh approach and saying, this kid's economical, he's athletic. Um,
Yep.
if I'm looking for a guy like a Drew Brees, maybe I could mold him into that. I just think that would be the best spot for him, and I think that's the most likely to take him.
Is it the idea that he would be taking another Big Ten quarterback to the promised land in his head? Going from Drew Brees and Purdue to JJ McCarthy in Michigan. The problem with Denver is their next pick isn't until the 76th pick. So if they don't
Mm-hmm.
pick him there at 12, right, they're going to have to trade up and give away more assets.
Yes.
And I don't see that happening. I mean, they do have a healthy amount of picks. They have right now they have 8 picks, but in reality, do they have to take a flyer there? Again,
Mm-hmm.
I see a lot of mock drafts that have said Brock Bowers and the excitement of him as a tight end, and we know what a tight end can do for an offense. Look at San Francisco, look at Kansas City, hell, look at Minnesota as we're talking about them. But in that 12th pick, do they almost have to, or can they trade down a little bit? Can they find somebody who also might be looking at a tight end or a receiver and want to jump up to 12, slide down just a little bit, and then to your point, get your Knicks?
Now here's something to remember too. Minnesota is also picking at 23.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
technically they could grab whatever they want there. And the idea that Bo Nix could still be on the board, as you said, and take him there or a Michael Penix
Right.
there. I think both of those guys could conceivably make it that far. But again, as
Yeah.
as, as you said, this if you don't take him, someone will, and that someone to me would be the Raiders, who also need a quarterback. I mean, we've pretty much identified the top teams that need one. So
Right.
if you don't take a Knicks there, it falls to the Raiders. I don't think JJ McCarthy will fall to them. I think the Broncos, no matter what, will end up getting him. To me, that's the
Yeah.
fit. So really, when we look at it at number 13, the Raiders, do they take a Penix? Do they take a Knicks? What do they do there? If those are the two top quarterbacks that are left, it doesn't seem like they have much of a choice between A and B.
It seems like for Oakland, bare minimum, they can't strike out or have a guy that's going to be an injury prone player.
You said it. You
I
said
think to
Oakland.
your point, I did. Yeah, I did. So
Force
I
of
think
habit. Yeah.
yes, yes. Sorry, Oakland, Las Vegas.
See.
It does feel like more and more like they probably need a player like Nick's there. Now, again, the nice thing is the Raiders actually have 8 picks, but they have 3 picks in the top 77. So they
Hmm.
go 13, 44, and 77. Can they package that second and third rounder and maybe jump up? Can they do something like that to a needy team who maybe doesn't need a quarterback or feels like they've got some things answered? Or do they trade back? I mean, it's again, I guess that's kind of the nice thing is I feel
Hmm.
like you realistically have probably 6 quarterbacks that excite people to one degree or another. Um, but man, it'll be interesting to see what Las Vegas does.
We do.
So
I could see them going with a Penix. To me, there's something about him that I could see it. To me, that would be a system. And here's the thing: if for some reason he got injured or his body
right,
broke down on him, you have Aiden McConnell as a safety net back there who's proven that he can play
right,
and can play well, is also a guy that's accurate. And here's the thing to me too: if you're looking for a pocket passer that's accurate, you kind of already have that in Aiden McConnell. If you're looking for a
right.
guy with a superstar arm, that kind of looks more Penix to me, a guy with more arm
Right.
talent. And that's not to knock Aiden McConnell, is not, he has arm talent. It's just not as dynamic as a Penix. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, you've got your backup, I suppose, but you still have
Mhm.
two young quarterbacks then, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
again, it's
in a low risk the guy though with McConnell, it's not like you promised him anything. He was a late round pick.
right, right.
So, he's locked up for 3 years at this point.
True. That's, I mean, and again, I think a team like Las Vegas for a player like Penix, where really any level of excitement you generate under center or wherever it might be at quarterback, um, you've got a fan base that's going to eat it up, every
Mhm.
bit of it. So
So
how they were excited about Garoppolo, and as talented as I think Jimmy Garoppolo was, that
was
guy's about as boring as it comes. I mean,
yeah,
it's in terms of
and
quarterback
injury
play.
prone.
So absolutely.
So
So
just to identify here, Chicago, Washington, New England.
yep,
Um, we're skipping Falcons, Vikings,
yep,
Broncos, Raiders. Six teams that need quarterbacks. I mean, that's what you're looking at. Really, six teams. Every other team doesn't really need one. Those are the six that seem to need one. And you could even
yeah.
debate if I almost said Oakland. You could debate if Vegas needs a quarterback. You could roll with O'Connell if you weren't crazy about these guys. You could do that.
You could. You could. And at some point in time, I also wonder a team, and I don't think it's gonna happen in the first round, although it would totally shock me. At what point does a team like the Rams jump back in the mix for a quarterback? At some point in time, do you get and I don't necessarily think this way, but are you gonna get a Tampa Bay who tries to jump into the top 40, 45 picks and their draft? Because Tampa Bay's got 26, they've got other needs. They're not going, they're to me, I think they're probably gonna draft Chop Robinson, but at some point in time, will Tampa have to do that as well? Will they trade those two third round picks to jump up into the beginning of the second and take any of those quarterbacks that might be hanging out if for some crazy reason one of them is sitting there.
See,
So
I think the teams that you just mentioned are teams that are going to basically have to wait for a quarterback until the wheels fall off. Until their teams
that's
just fall
scary,
apart and they naturally drop
right?
down. And either that or, Stafford retires and they're going, "Oh crap, we need a quarterback." They either
Right.
sign a holdover and then suck, or they give up several years worth of draft picks for a guy that they think is the franchise. I mean, that's pretty much looks like what their future is.
Seems like it more and more with those two in particular.
Mhm.
So
So, all right. So just so we have predictions here, I'm gonna put it on the table. I'm gonna give where I think guys are going, and I feel pretty. I don't feel great about any of it. Who knows? But I say Chicago, Caleb Williams, Washington, Jane Daniels. Uh, frick. Then it goes back to New England. New England, Drake May.
it does.
I'm gonna go New England, Drake May. I'm gonna go Vikings, Bo Nix, and Broncos, JJ McCarthy. Raiders, I'm going Michael Penix. I'm gonna leave it there. I feel I like that.
Yeah, I'm with you on the first three, especially if the Patriots don't move out of there. Um, I still lean towards the Vikings taking Penix. There's just something there. I saw Kevin O'Connell on the Pat McAfee show, and there was just something about the way he talked about the position of quarterback and what it demands that to me smacked of trying to get somebody in there that's a little bit more dynamic. Could be wrong, could be a misread on my part just from watching him talk about it. But then I think you go, with the Raiders, right? Do they take someone? I don't really think so. I think they might
Mhm.
wait and just be patient. Um, I like Knicks to Denver. I do. And I know there's
Mm.
a lot of people saying Bowers, but now that being said, uh, I can't imagine Knicks really wants to play for Sean Payton. And the things that happen to be happening in Denver right now just seem very messy. Very, very messy. Just take Brock Bowers and let Knicks go to a franchise that's going to treat him the right way, or Penix for that matter, if it flips to
Mhm.
your point. So
Well, regardless, we have a few more weeks here before the draft happens. So Lo and behold, we will have more storylines as they bust out. Who knows? Maybe there's a couple trades as we lead up to it that happen. No matter what happens, we'll be on it. And also, we will be doing a live draft commentary. That'll be something that we start probably about 9 to 10 picks into it, but we will be rocking it out. We'll be going live. It'll be our first live stream, so should be pretty exciting. Up until then, we're out, man.